So this is where I left. We created the skeleton and our web page is running. And as I said, it's a JSP page and HTML, which is integrated with HTML. With JSP is like a standard Java standard tag library that integrates HTML with Java codes to synchronize or show data for the users at the front end. And there's one more thing I would like to add. In the first video, we did build the backend. So if you just go for backend, you don't need to use JSP because you will be using, for example, like React, Vue, and the other one, Angular. You can use those. If you use those, you don't need these libraries because that's probably the modern technology now, and just let Java to take care of the backend and use JavaScript for the front end. But for this purpose, we are going to build a web application. So we created our database, but it's a database. It doesn't even have any tables. So let's build the model. And for that, in our structure inside here, we need to add a couple more folders. If you are dealing inside the SpringToolSuite, let me open it. So let me show you what I mean. These are called packages, and it's easy like to right click and create, so there's no confusion there because the application is kind of designed to take care of all these things. But for us, we remember that a package is a folder, and everything you put in that package to organize it, it's kind of a subfolder for a folder. So let's, for example, if I come here and that source, and this is the other difference, like there's a redundant mapping, like it connects the same folder, source main resources, which is technically the same folder, which is source main Java, source resources, main resource is the same thing, but it shows it redundantly to make it easier for the user to stay inside the application. And then wherever you have the application, you would right click there. On top of that full address, you would say like create a new package. So then you would add the last name at top of that one, like something is like test, and it's gonna create a package there. So if I add a folder here, then it will be inside this. So that's the thing. Technically, you're creating a folder inside this path. We are done with this one. There we go. Now it's gonna keep circling, so I don't have to deal with that in Visual Studio Code. Here we go. So we need a couple more folders. One of the easy way that I like to do is use a terminal, and we can even do it inside Visual Studio Code. So it's cd idea, or even to make it easy for myself, I can just say open this in the terminal. There we go. And I can see controller here. That's where I want to be. Let me do a path. So you want to be inside your main folder, then inside your project. So that is Java main, then the ideas inside idea above the controller that we created, but you should be able to see this folder, this file. You want to create the other packages or folders in the same folder that you can see the application.java file. So one of the easy one is say make directory. We need a model, which will be our database related files. We need a repository. So I'm gonna take like one step at a time to complete this, so you can understand technically what goes behind the scene instead of just doing everything at once. So we do require another thing called services and or validation on top of that. But let's do this two things first. We models and repositories. Let's make it total. Now there are two folders for us. So I need a table, and that will go here, the object, and I will need an interface that will go here. So let's create that one, ls, and I'm not even gonna enter inside the folder. I'm gonna say touch models. What I need ideas table. So it will be ideas You can add like model if you want, or you don't even have to add anything. Idea like table name, and it would be .java. So if I do that, there we go. So we do now repeat ourselves, package com, and we need to add this path to connect it to outside other folders. So there we go. Now it's part of the package. Now since it is a class and we will be creating objects from it, so it's public class idea. Make sure you put exact name of the folder you created. The same thing, whatever you created here should look like that. So to make this a table inside a database, we definitely need Java annotation, and that will be entity for table, and it's from the persistent package API, and I can give it a name, like if I want, like add table there we go, name equals idea with the small caps. This one is capital. I need, even if you don't do it, it will do it automatically because it's an interface. And I will show you what I mean about some of the interface here that's added. It's a Java annotation and what happens in the background. So we want our table to have a couple rows and folders. Let's just start from two basic ones, and then we will go forward to add more into the table and what we need to do when we need to modify it as we go along. So the first one, we need an ID, so that will be private ID long ID. So that type is long, it's ID, and you don't want to type the ID for each person. So for that, we have a good annotation that's called ID, and it will automatically create. And we can also, the ID annotation, this is gonna make it a primary key, but we want to also avoid typing the 1, 2, 3 for each user. So for that, it will be generate Java generate value, that persistence, and then in here we will say strategy equals to generation type, and then you want to put period. So there are a couple of things you can choose auto, or you want to say identity sequence. So for this, I'm going to choose identity, and it will create the serial number automatically and keep adding to it. And the other thing, remember, you don't want to put this semicolon here because it's going to break your application when you have annotations. So no semicolon at the end of annotation there. We will the other one, private, we will have the name table. Let's say like whatever people posted, or idea name, or just code name. It will be private, the string name. So we want to have some validation before users put data in it. So let's go back to Java annotation for our validation. So it will be size, and we will say min equals minimum 1 letter, maximum equals 255. And if someone puts something different, give it a message, say like, please type between, or enter between 1 to 255 characters. And you have some other ones. For example, if you want to just check the minimum to make sure no one types null values, you can just say it min and just give it one value. So for this, these are two settings. We can probably build some of the extra things on top of it. But let's make this change first and then build the extra data on top of it. So let's add a constructor, and in Java, constructor is a class name without it's a default constructor, empty, there's nothing in it, and it's just the public and the class name, open and close brackets. And remember, if you have a saved data, you want to protect everything, you don't want to leave this port open. So, and probably you learned in Java, when you have this one, you don't specifically access one thing, you can access anything inside that object. So depending on how strict you want your application, and definitely a public good idea gives it an easy access anyway. So let's create a setter and getter. I'm gonna move this at the end of it and generate a setter and getter. I have a plugin for that installed or a extension. I'm gonna say create this. I enjoy it now because in the past you had to type this whole thing if you were using Visual Studio Code. So we have get ID, set ID, and there we go, it's all set. And let's restart our, take a look at our database first. There's no table. So now let's restart it. See, it created a table, but in order to access this, we need to use an API or an interface API. So let's see, the table is created. How many columns? 1, 2. Okay, it's 1, 2. It has used big int, data type in SQL, and the other one has a maximum of 255 characters. So the other way I can take a look at this table is click this one. It says select from idea as idea. That's the table. It has 2 columns. So to interact with our table, we need something else called repository, and that's an API. So an interface API, an interface, and that's built by Spring Boot. So let's do that, and we will take a look at its API, the what is under the hood, and what things you can do with it. So let's say ls cd repository for this one, touch idea repository .java. Let's delete the other one. Okay, there we go. It doesn't even show up there, so there we go. Yes. So that's remove the extra one. Let's come here. As you probably haven't guessed it, first line first, package com repository, and this is an interface, public. You studied interface, so let's do interface. There are the methods in interface that's mentioned, but it's not defined. It doesn't have any body. So you tell like what it needs to exist and what people can use it, and users will, or programmers will define it and add extra code. So that's called public interface, and that's idea repository. So here we go. If you create this in IntelliJ idea or a Spring Boot, this is there automatically. But this is not enough for us because we need to use CRUD repository, and we need to make this a repository, so we can use the API that will be at repository. So down, add the annotation, and in here we want to extend CRUD repository, and we want to give it 2 types of data, which is called generics. In generics, so let me just for my accent sake, Java and generics. So that's one thing, you want to take a look at it. And the other one I would like you to take a look at it, CRUD repository. So the repository, you can choose a type from your table, your objects, whatever objects you have there, like we have a user object or that's a data model or something different, then you would choose a type ID. So it could be long, capital or small, integer, all those things. But usually we will go with long. And these are the interfaces that it has, the interface has. You can use all these methods that's been defined there and you can modify it. So that's a link. I would like you to go and take a look at it. It helps you. Sometimes you may forget it. And the important one probably is the optional, which is added recently, that will give you an option of just choosing by ID. People used to do it in the past too, but now it's much easier. I mean, not that recent with Java 8 or 7. Yeah. So let's what do we want? We want the idea object, so that's the generic part, and we want type long. For the repository, so once this is, it gives me an error because it needs to import idea model to connect with it. Right now it's not connected. They're living in two different rooms. So let's import quick fix or control space. Say import this, control space, and import, or you can just say import this whole package. So now it is connected. When we want to add a data and we want to retrieve it in our web page, so this is where we start. And the first thing we want to do, we say like, give us a list of any number of users that exist in the table. So right now our table is empty, but I will do one thing manually. I will add this, just give it an idea like flying cars, and I would say apply. It should give it automatically 1. There we go, because that's the primary key there. So we want to retrieve this one at first step, then we will come back and do everything from model and move forward from there. So let's come back here. Let's first one, get the list of. When you see list, you want to create the Java util, and we say that give us a list of all idea object, like all these objects, and we sign the API that there's an object, it's called find all, and that's the method. Let me just go there again. We had a find all method. There we go, that's one. So this is in this repository has these things implemented in the back under the hood, and we will take a look at that later. But for now, we need to import Java package for list, and that will be util. So it gives me an error. Let's see, is there Java util import? No. Okay. Import java.util, not all of them, but list. There you go. Solved. We can get by ID, but we can get by ID. Let's add this one too, because we will use optional, and in optional we need all idea from the table. Then we will say it find by ID, and what is the type? It's type object long with ID. And you say like get the ID from the object from this. You will see it in action too. So the repository is created. So we should be able now to retrieve our this flying car in the view model, in the view part of the framework. So now we come to index in controller. So far we're using three parts of Spring Boot. The first one, we have the model part that we created the table, and the important one, the controller that directs the traffic, gets the data, checks the validation. Now in order to get data interact with model table, with model hibernate, we use the idea, the repository, which is the interface, to do like operations like select all these things on a model object. So if you were, for example, this one, it says find all. If you were in SQL, it will be select all from idea. Actually, let me show you that works, this command. That's what it translates to it. So, there you go. So, and the other one, this one, find by ID, is pretty much like saying that where ID equals to 1. If there were 2, what about having 2? Have to do an apply for this one. It's the code. There we go. So select all, let's see. There we go. By ID. So it shows that user. So that's the purpose when we say like, oh, whatever post you are, you want to delete one thing and it just gets that ID. Okay, let's go and retrieve the first one first. So let's go to controller, because this is where we want to deal with it. In get mapping, we want to add something called model class. Should be small. Don't make it capital. Import this one. And here we want to access the repository. So for that, it will be model.add attribute. What do you want? You want a list of ideas. Where you want to get it from? I want to get it from repository. So that will be idea repository dot. So this part I did it on purpose. Whenever you want to access something and you want to pass it through Java, you have to connect it and give it you need to add it in the constructor so you can access it. And as for example, when you create a Java class, then you say like I give this public constructor, then I say like you can access this, get this, create from this one. But when I want to connect this, make available with controller, then I have to do the same thing. So for that, I will come to controller. I will add, there are 2 methods, auto-wire, probably there are more, but auto-wire, you can do this one, but I'm going to use one that's classic because it's a basic beginner tutorial. So this will be, we'll call it private idea repository. I want to import it first, then call it idea repo, and then I will build my constructor there, public idea controller. So I want to give this access traffic here, and this will be object type. The data type is an object called idea repository, and to associate that name with it, it will be idea repo. And whenever the data comes for that connected this way. There you go. But we will do a lot of more of these, because when we have services, we need to add all of them one to another to get access to it. But there's definitely a shorter and easier way that's auto-wired, and that takes care of this part of the constructor, that you don't need to do this one. Okay, so now if we do this again, it will be idea repo. We know that we created this object and associated this. So this variable has this type of object, which is idea. In constructor, we connect it with this one. So now we say idea.repo, and now it gets access to whatever exists inside this repo. So these are all the extra methods inside it that we didn't implement, but it still exists. But what you want to do is we want to find all, or get one by ID, not find by all. I did find all. Okay, let's do find all, and then the other one was the optional. So this one will give all of them, but we only need one. Just a rebrief. We created the model, we created the repository, which retrieves data from object, from table. In controller, we came and built the constructor, and we imported repository here, so we can have access to all those methods inside repository class. And now we say that retrieve the list and retrieve this command, which is find select all, and put it in idea list. So that's what it does. It puts it here. And now we need to go to our JSP file and see how can we get the data out of there. So let's see, something is called, the tag name is cout. So that's the cout, but we do need a cout. Yeah, let's cout. I'm going to add this one. Let's make it easy. For example, if you need cout tag, there you go. So the cout is part of already this syntax, and that's all you need. And for this one, value equals, now you want to give the value name. What is our variable in Java? So this is the front end, but we have to retrieve the Java variable and put it here. So let me open two pages here. Let's get rid of this for now. In the backend, we have connected our repository with our controller, and this variable in controller, which comes as an attribute inside model, is holding this data. So we need to get this one, ideas list, and mention it here. But since this is find all, so we are saying show me a data, but all of them. So in Java, you have a list, for example, you have a for loop. It loops through all data, but you need to get a specific the data that you want to retrieve. So I'm going to try a couple things. First, I'm going to say, for example, just basic things that we studied. I'm going to say from index 0 give me something. I'm going to kind of show you some experiment instead of just running the code without any problems. Because there will be times that you want to get one ID and you want to practice it. It doesn't work. Because remember, in Java, you have to do once it's an object, then you do object.getID. If it is a list, then you give it ID number, for example, 1 or 2. If it is a list, then you do the brackets. So let's see what our application complains about. It says there's not such a thing, does not exist, so there's a problem in column thin, so number 10, sorry for the accent. So let me do this. Java dot let's get 0. None of them are working, and there's a reason for that one, because we have a list and that list is an object. So now we gotta think about how to get an object list. So it's like it's find all, but this is now it has all the objects, not all the tables. So if I do find that ID, now actually it doesn't have the syntax behind it. It's another problem from copying from internet. Yeah, there we go. Like what's going on there. So now it gave me, sorry guys, the other thing it was supposed to work didn't work is when you copy a code from internet, you definitely have to be punished for it, because there are no quotes, the double quotes inside. You don't need that, otherwise it will be a string. So this is a Java code. You'd say go to ID as list, then get index 0, but index 0 is a whole object. But what you want to get from index 0 is that ID. Is it gonna work? It's ID 1. What about let's make a second line. So most of these problems I'm doing on purpose because there are quotes already available, but I'm doing it on purpose because it gives you an idea when you build a web application. You have to think that in Java everything is a class and everything is generated as an object. So when you deal with an object, you need to know that all objects have attributes and properties. So when you want to get an attribute, and then you need to know what is inside it. So it's always like you add a period, then whatever is inside it. So for that, for example, this is a list of objects, which means that our list is this thing. It retrieves everything inside this one. So when it retrieves everything in this one, it technically can just say like can't just put an like the index, because there are so many objects created from this one. Because this is a class, it's a blueprint, and there are so many users created out of this one. So you have to see which one of the data here that you want to retrieve it, but each one has its own identity that you want to retrieve it. So that was the purpose about this one. But yeah, definitely I did miss that second tag when I put the right code, instead it didn't work. So that was one thing I missed it. And actually it's kind of a longer video. So so for now we have an application that is retrieving data from our database. I know it's not the best application yet, but this is what it is getting from server. This ID one, that one, cout. But you can definitely do a for each that will show you everything inside the database. Okay, so for now, let me add just this show part, but we do have the list for this one. That's why you see we don't want to repeat ourselves. There we go, car 1, car 2, so that's over there, and that's the basic of having the front end connected to back end and retrieving data. So for this part, I only focused on making sure you can have an application, a web application, a database, and interface that's running and it's working. And before I stop this video, I'm going to show you one more thing about the repository interface. But yeah, it's technically, so this one is the view. You put the Java code and you get access the backend. And to make sure that to repeat it, you have the table as model. Then you have repository. So this goes and gets all the data, retrieves it. And then we have a controller. The controller goes to repository, gets all the data, and then we go to index.jsp. And here when we turn this on, it makes a request and says, I need this variable with this information to show it. So it comes to controller. First, controller checks where it's going. So this is the address, and we have put this index page inside this port. So if I change, we can change it. I have put it inside this one. When you put just a backslash, that means whatever port number it says, it is just right there. So that is this index page. Whenever someone goes to this backslash, it will render this index page and return it as a string. And we have this model object or class in Java that has these attributes that we create an attribute, then we add data to it. And this is the one that carries the data here to show it. And it will do both ways, that we can submit a form through model and form comes here and it takes it to repository to table to save it. So for this part, that's all. And I hope it wasn't so confusing, the method that I took for teaching this. And my purpose on this video is to exactly understand like how you can build the database and then retrieve data and then get it together. So in next video, we will kind of do, we will move a couple of steps back and we will start from model. We will build model first, then repository and services, and we will move on from there. Thank you for being patient and watching this video. Please feel free to leave any comments and see you in next video.